So here you can see the area that I'm working with. This is going to have the open banister area. You're coming down the stairs. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how many stairs up, or how far up from the bottom of the stairs do we want to keep the opening. In many cases, in new build construction, first floor areas, you go up to maybe about the nose of the 5th step. In this case, I want to create as much opening as possible. So I measured how high I've got in terms of availability with the height from the bottom to the height of where the railing, the banister railing will be. And so I've used about 31.5 inches as my rough height measurement, and I've realized I can go up to about the 7th step. So that's going to give me a nice open area right from where you see that double stud right now, all open all the way down through to the bottom of the stairs. And then I'll build a banister accordingly. That's going to give me some nice light, some nice open access here for when people are coming down the stairs. You can see into the area, and allows additional light to come through from the windows that are over here on this side. When I was planning to build this area for the open banister, this is going to be the edge of the open wall. Want to make sure that it's real nice and stiff. I ended up designing it so that I could have a double stud secured at the top, also at the bottom, but also in the middle, because this is going to be secured and tightened up with some drywall down below, or some shelving or other closet area I may build. But again, up here it's going to be fairly open. So what I did is I made sure that I put a cleat here in line and level with where the stud needs to be. So it also helps to ensure that this wall is now going to be in very nice plumb and level here for when I have my open wall area. Up at the top area where I'm going to have the wall ending here and the open area for the staircase in here, remember I mentioned that I'm going to have it open to the nose of the 7th step. The way I figured out where to position my studs, and therefore to end my wall, is I took a level and made a level measurement here. Made a level measurement and then marked it on the staircase. You can actually see it. I did it a different way in the beginning and then scrapped that line, and I actually put in a new line here. That line that I've now measured, this one right here, you can see I put with the arrow, and I transcribed that after I put this stud into place in line with this point here. I transcribed that across. I took 2 scrap pieces of wood, one that simulates the top plate I'll be using at the 42.5 angle, so that when I put it up here against the stairs and hold it in line with where that mark will be, then with my other place I've put a cleat here at a 42.5 degree angle again, and I simply slid that cleat up until it hits flush, allows my top plate to be in line, clamped, and then nailed that cleat into place. From there I'm going to measure from my mark down to the nose, or the edge of where the bottom of the stair is. That mark in my case happens to be 74.25 inches. I cut the first angle at 42.5 degrees at this end, and from the inside mark, because I'm measuring at the bottom, in this case this is going to be the bottom of this board, I'm measuring from the bottom, so the inside edge all the way down on the same side to 74.5 degrees. Set my saw at my 42.5 degree angle, make the cut. I kind of overdid it by using a double block here, and I actually glued and screwed the block together just to give it a lot of meat down here at the bottom of the stairway. And ultimately, when this is fastened down to the bottom plate, this top plate is fastened down here. It gives me a little more to work with, and ultimately when I build my post for the banister onto the front, I've got a nice big solid chunk of material to work with. So now I'm going to position my double block for the bottom. Position it right in line with the nose of the stairs. Make sure it's nice and square. And clamp it in place. Now, when I set the board on the top plate, against there, set it down flush bottom. You can see that actually, a little difficult with the camera angle here, but you can see actually that, you know, nice and flush here. And I've got a nice flush seat here across the stairs, and same thing up here. Now what I can do is measure the rest of my studs from the bottom plate to the top plate where the banister is going to be. So basically I can measure from here down at the bottom up to bottom edge of the top plate here, and then set my studs on 16s and build the rest of my wall. So now a quick trick to measure your studs when you've got an angled top plate, or a bottom plate frankly, is to just use your 16-inch stud spacing. On the bottom, it's simply the way you would normally do it for any other wall. In this case, I'm going to measure from the edge of the stud, come over here at my 16, and mark again the edge of the stud here. But I can do the same thing up here at the top. I can go from here, measure 16 from the edge of the stud, and where 16 crosses here, at this stud, that's going to be the edge of my stud at the angled top plate. So I'll make a mark at that 16, draw my line down so that it's level, and I'll know exactly how high to measure from the stud edge mark on the bottom plate to the stud edge mark on the top plate. So here I'm building a piece of framing that is going to create the space where I'm going to have storage underneath this staircase. I've got a stud on the left, a stud on the right, my bottom plate, but the storage needs to be underneath this staircase. And so when I'm going to build the opening, I need a top plate in this area to create the top side of my framing. I want that to be in line with this angle in the bottom of the staircase, so I can maximize the amount of space that I have underneath here, as opposed to just building something straight across and then I lose this corner. It's not a lot of space, but I'm trying to maximize the use. I also don't want to put it directly in line with this, because if things are a bit out of level or sticking out a little more, or not necessarily straight, I want to have a little bit of extra clearance underneath the staircase here, so as I build my storage or whatever underneath, I'm not going to have anything going under and maybe interfering with this piece here or anything else that might be underneath the staircase. So one thing we run into when we're building structures like this, where you've got some angled pieces and pieces underneath that maybe you're trying to match where you're going to have some framing member on the piece in front, next to, behind, or so on, is how to transfer the marks and to get where this piece is located transferred to the work in front or behind or next to it. One very simple way is to just take a small level, find the corner here that you're going to work with, make sure that the back corner of that level, in this case my back corner of the level, is lined up right on the edge of this corner. And what I'm going to do then is just make sure that my level is level, and once it's level I can transfer the mark from the corner of this point right along to the face of this piece here, and then I'll know that this line is in perfect position with the edge of this work behind it that I want this next piece to line up to. I've transferred my marks to my two studs. I'm going to take a measurement from that mark to that mark, and that's going to give me the length of the framing piece that I need from the top edge here to the top edge here. Before I take that measurement, I'm actually going to transfer these marks 1/2 inch down below each one, and that will drop my framing member, the bottom member of my framing member, 1/2 inch below this, giving me the clearance that I'm looking for underneath. So one quick thought when you're cutting your framing members, and especially when you're doing any kind of angled cuts, and if there's any precision required at all, always go a hair long on your measurement, because especially with angles, if you're short by even an 1/8 or a 1/16, it makes a tremendous difference on where it's going to be located then, either vertically or horizontally when you line up your work. So always cut, don't be afraid to cut twice, cut a little bit longer, check it, measure it again, test fit it, and then make your final cut if you need to. It always works out better. In this case, I measured my dimension from the mark on this stud to the mark on this stud is 20 inches. When you're measuring from angles with simple tools, a tape at your saw or so on, I tend to go a little on the high side of 20 inches. In this case, I am just under an 1/8 high, and when I line up with my bottom mark here, I'm a 1/2 inch off on the vertical position over here, just because of a 1/16 to an 1/8 difference in the length on this side of the cut. So again, when you're working with angles, and if precision is important, which I try to be precise as best I can in most cases, always err on the high side, come back, test fit, recheck, cut again. Now as I'm fitting up this piece, that's the angled piece, the angled top plate in between my two studs here underneath my stairway, you can see the original mark I transferred from the bottom of the staircase itself. And you can also see the mark that I put a 1/2 inch below so that I can locate my top plate with a 1/2 inch of clearance below the stairs. I've made my cut. And now I'm going to use a clamp to give me an extra set of hands, hold this top plate in place on the bottom end, and because it's angled, it's going to naturally fit into place where it needs to be at the top end. I'm going to use a set of clamps here, not only to help hold the piece in place vertically, like I mentioned with the one on the bottom on the right hand side, but I also really like to use clamps when I'm doing framing, again, extra sets of hands, but it also ensures that the edges of the framing pieces are going to be in line with each other here, really nice and square. And now I can keep my hands free because I'm working alone to do the nailing and any other work that I need to do.